Alright, so pay attention and tell me if you can spot what I'm doing wrong and what the difference is. There's definitely a difference. I'll do it again. Now, for anybody that said he was abrading too much or too little, you're absolutely right. What I want to break down for you is abrading. Now, abrading is just not to strengthen platforms. Now, this is very common. This is what all nappers are taught, and this is true, but there's more to abrasion than just strengthening a platform. Most nappers are taught you abrade a platform so it doesn't crush under the impact of a hard hammer or a soft hammer strike. Again, that's true, and this is part of the story, but it's the smallest part of the story. Now, what abrasion truly does, it controls the energy into the stone. An over-abraded platform, an over-abraded edge, will allow a lot of the energy to travel sideways when you're making that strike, when you're using a form of a billet. Now, an abraded edge, a properly abraded edge, not an over-abraded edge, what this does is it narrows the entry point when you make contact with your billet into that stone's edge or its platform. This allows you to focus the force into the point of impact. This gives you a cleaner initiation and a more predictable flake. I want you to think of abrasion as aiming energy. You're aiming the energy from your strike into the stone and just not a reinforcement of the edge. It's more than just reinforcing the edge. And I know there's probably a lot of new nappers, and I would say probably most long-term nappers don't realize that when you over-abrade an edge, you are reducing your flake size. And this will very much surprise people because, again, it goes against that common knowledge of always strengthen your edge. Heavy abrasion will absolutely shorten your flake travel. And with that shortened travel, this increases the chance of a hinge or a step fracture. Now, a light abrasion or an appropriate abrasion allows for longer, thinner flakes. More importantly, from those longer, thinner flakes, this increases your thinning potential. And that's what a lot of folks want to have nice, thin tools based on what its desired end state is. So when people say, hey, I don't know why my flakes are so small. I'm abrading my edge, I'm abrading my platform. Well, it's because you're over abrading it and you're not giving more of that pinpoint abrasion, allowing that flake to really travel. Simply put, if anyone has ever said my flakes are not that big or they're not that long, it's because you're over abrading. Now, abrasion greatly impacts the termination of a flake as it's traveling across or through that stone. And this is rarely discussed because not a lot of people know about it. They just think, I abrade, nice, strong, reinforced platform or edge, give it a hard hit, I'm gonna get that flake. Now, there is some truth to this, but an over abraded edge will terminate or die much earlier as it travels through that stone. You're almost selling yourself short by over-abrading, thinking the stronger the edge, the farther the flake, but it's actually the complete opposite of that. Abrasion isn't neutral. It ultimately chooses how the flake will actually end. And from that, we can ultimately say abrasion is force insurance. If your angle is slightly off on your strike, force insurance. If your strike is heavier than you intended, force insurance. If the platform is thinner than the most ideal platform, it's force insurance. And this is why beginners as well as experienced snappers are told to abrade or think they have to abrade more. Not because it's correct, but it greatly reduces the chances of a catastrophic failure or that edge crushing or creating a bunch of steps and hinges in that strike. And from this, I've drawn the conclusion that abrasion can change the way our mistakes look. And this is a subtle flint napping but important thing to consider. Without abrasion, with zero abrasion, shattering, edge failure, cracks, but abrasion doesn't necessarily eliminate errors. It just downgrades them. It makes A large error like a hinge, you know, a quarter of an inch into your stone when it should be traveling all the way through, it just downgrades it. Now, with all that being said, why this is important is people think that abrasion is only for strength. So with that, with this kind of myth in their head, they over abrade everything. And from this, they quickly come to the conclusion, hey, I'm doing everything right, but I'm not getting the results that I want. And I'm not saying people are abrading wrong. What I am saying is people have been told abrasion serves one purpose, and they've stuck with that purpose, and they've gotten some good results. If you want some better results, you have to consider that abrading a platform or braiding an edge does more than what we are told. And if you don't think of that, you don't consider it, then stone feels pretty random. It feels uncontrollable. Stone can be that way at times, but you, as the napper, have the ability to control the stone by different practices and different methods. The one takeaway I want you to think about when it comes to abrading is aiming your energy. That's really what it boils down to. You're able to aim all the energy from that strike into the stone and where it's going. That's what abrasion does. And it's not just toughening the edge or reinforcing the edge. That is true, but think of it as my aiming energy. Let me give you some examples. Let's go back to this piece of stone. Let's look at this little platform right here. You can see it, and I'm going to try to aim. Again, I'm aiming my energy up into this. I've got a little divot right here. You can just kind of see it. So I'm going to hit high up on my platform, hoping to clear out this divot and ride it up into here. My flake will likely terminate in this hinge, hopefully clearing it out, and I might get a little bit of cortex right up in this area. So with this, when I abrade, I actually like to look right at my point of impact. And I'm saying if I'm impacting this edge right here, give my edge a little roughing, I flip it over, and then I'm going to hit with my abrader exactly where I'm going to be striking. That's what I want to reinforce, and that is simply this. I've got the back side of my platform, the top side reinforced, and I'm going to give it a good strike. So I need to get enough stone where this guy is cleared out and I can ride it to these little hinges right here and probably hopefully remain with a little bit of cortex up on the top that I can pop off on that back side. We'll use a moose billet and let's give it the proper strike. This is my angle. I'm looking to come down into it, swipe away, focus. I see where I'm striking. I'm going to tweak. I'm going to turn my stone just a little bit because when I strike, I want this guy to be perfectly lined up where I know my repetition and my billet is every single time. Ride it up. Ready? Exactly how I called it, with the right amount of abrasion. And I would even say, based on that strike, I gave it a little bit too much, but just enough. From that, I cleared out my pocket. I popped off this whole flake. Just got a little bit of that hinge out, and I left that little chunk of cortex right here. So when I tell folks abrasion is aiming that energy with that entire flake, I called it to a T. Because I think of abrasion, yes, I'm reinforcing my edge. This is how I aim that energy. When I have an edge and I see people abrading back and forth, and I do it at times, don't get me wrong. But when I see this, what they're doing is they're reinforcing a whole edge and they're swinging for the fences. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you think about how can I aim my energy so I get a nice clean flake, a flake that travels farther, and even on this one, this entire flake was traveling uphill. I was still considering my angle, how I was aiming that energy. I was able to call it to a T and reduce it, leaving that little nub of cortex at the very end. I'm gonna over abrade. Let's go here. Lots of abrasion. Too much. So when I strike this, you can see from here to here, this is where I'm gonna hit. But when my billet hits this point, all of that energy is going to be spread across this. I've just kind of connected it by that over abrasion. Look at my flakes. Should have been a pretty clean and easy hit, but they just terminated. It left me a whole bunch of little future problems, a little bit of wave, one step, and it looks like a little hinge right there. Now let's go to this little small piece of stone. Let's just see about what a little bit of abrasion does on this little edge here. That right there, flake I pulled. Little light, terminate a little early. Let's go right amount of abrasion. Let's give it a tap. Whole way down. Let's go right here. Let's follow this ridge, just like I'm doing a blade core. And let's give it too much abrasion. Really rubbing. I'm nervous. I'm trying to pull a long flake. So I'm really going to braid the crap out of it. Too much. Same angle, same strike. Quick termination, right to there. Obviously, abrasion is key. It does reinforce that edge. It does strengthen the edge. But when we think about how much abrasion we're doing, for over abrading, we're spreading out the energy when we make contact. If we narrow our abrasion, give it enough to reinforce, but allows us to aim the energy, we're going to get longer flakes. We're going to be able to clear out a lot of our hinges and a lot of our problems. Every napper has been told you have to braid your platforms, you have to braid your edges before you strike. 100% true. Think about how much abrasion is actually needed to remove that flake. We're always taking in stone dynamics. Am I traveling uphill? Am I traveling downhill? Is there a divot? Where am I impacting what lies behind that projected flake travel? We're always thinking about those things. What's my best approach angle? How am I holding the stone? What sort of support I have? But think about your abrasion as a way, aim your strike for longer, thinner flakes, and you're going to wind up getting some results. But before I go, I do want to add this. If you go to DonnyDoes.com right now, you will see an array of flint napping classes that I will be offering this summer at the Laughing Coyote Project in Longmont, Colorado. These classes, I will cover everything from the basics of flint napping with no experience needed to people that are well-seasoned nappers and want to elevate their game a bit. How to make stone axes, stone knives, different projectile points, as well as all sorts of prehistoric tools. These are one-day courses. You don't have to bring anything. I'm supplying every billet, every bit of stone. I'm going to give you the best resources that I know to set you up for success. This is what I do for a living. I don't have a day job. I don't work a 9 to 5. I've dedicated my life to flint napping, and I want to share that with you. I wouldn't miss out. All right, that's all I got. Remember, it's tools, not trophies. See you in the bush.